In a world where kindness is often heralded as the highest virtue, it's easy to get caught up in the belief that we must be kind to everyone, all the time. But what happens when kindness becomes a burden? When saying yes to others means saying no to ourselves? It's time to reframe the way we think about kindness, not as a blanket rule to follow at all costs, but as a deliberate choice, one that we make with intention and self-awareness. For too long, kindness has been equated with self-sacrifice. We've been taught that being a good person means putting others first, even when it comes at the expense of our own emotional and mental health. This book isn't about discarding kindness altogether, nor is it about becoming selfish or indifferent to the needs of others. Instead, it's about recalibrating our understanding of kindness and recognizing that sometimes saying no and setting boundaries are the kindest things we can do, for ourselves and for others. At the heart of this journey is a psychological need to be liked and accepted. We are social creatures, and our desire for approval often drives us to overextend ourselves in the name of kindness. We fear rejection, we fear judgment, and we fear being seen as unkind. But the truth is, when we constantly prioritize others over ourselves, we end up drained, resentful, and emotionally exhausted. This book will take you through the process of redefining kindness, starting with recognizing unhealthy patterns of people-pleasing and emotional drain, and guiding you towards setting healthy boundaries that allow you to protect your emotional energy. Through this journey, you will learn how to say no without guilt, let go of toxic relationships, and develop the confidence to prioritize your own well-being without feeling selfish or unkind. True kindness starts with being kind to yourself. When you take care of your own needs, you're better equipped to be there for others in a meaningful and authentic way. It's time to let go of the old definitions of kindness that have silently governed your actions and embrace a new paradigm, one that champions balance, self-respect, and emotional well-being. At first glance, people-pleasing might seem like a harmless trait. After all, what's wrong with wanting to make others happy? But the truth is, people-pleasing is a behavior rooted in insecurity and fear, not genuine kindness. When you constantly seek to please others, you are operating from a place of anxiety, an anxiety that stems from the fear of rejection, disapproval, or conflict. Over time, this pattern can erode your self-esteem, undermine your sense of identity, and leave you feeling trapped in a cycle of saying yes to things you don't want to do. People-pleasing is deeply ingrained in our societal norms. From a young age, we're taught to be polite, to avoid conflict, and to put others' needs before our own. This conditioning becomes especially powerful when coupled with personal insecurities. Many people-pleasers are driven by a desire for external validation. They feel good about themselves when others are happy, and they fear that saying no will lead to rejection or conflict. There are several common signs of people-pleasing behavior. If you find yourself always saying yes, even when you want to say no, or if you avoid conflict at all costs, you may be trapped in this pattern. People-pleasers often seek validation from others, relying on external approval to feel worthy. This might look like going out of your way to meet others' expectations, even if it means sacrificing your own needs or comfort. Another sign is feeling guilty or anxious when you can't help someone, even when you know it's not your responsibility to do so. People-pleasing can also manifest as a fear of expressing your true feelings or opinions. You might find yourself agreeing with others just to avoid conflict, or going along with decisions that don't align with your values because you don't want to rock the boat. Over time, this behavior erodes your self-esteem as you begin to lose touch with your own desires and needs. You may start to feel resentful or frustrated, but instead of addressing those feelings, you push them down and continue to prioritize others. The impact of people-pleasing on your identity can be profound. When you spend all your time catering to others, you lose sight of who you are and what you want. You become so focused on making others happy that you forget about your own happiness. This creates a false self, an identity built on the expectations and desires of others rather than your own values and goals. The more you people please, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. Breaking free from the cycle of people-pleasing requires conscious effort and self-awareness. The first step is recognizing the behavior for what it is, a coping mechanism that stems from fear and insecurity. Once you become aware of your people-pleasing tendencies, you can begin to challenge them. Start by asking yourself why you feel compelled to say yes when you really want to say no. Are you afraid of disappointing someone? Are you seeking their approval? Understanding the motivations behind your behavior will help you begin to break the pattern. The next step is learning to say no. This can be incredibly difficult for people-pleasers who are used to putting others' needs before their own. But saying no is an essential skill for setting boundaries and protecting your emotional energy. When you say no to things that don't align with your values or goals, you create space for the things that truly matter to you. And when you say no with confidence, you begin to reclaim your power. It's important to remember that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it's one of the most powerful ways to take care of yourself. When you say no, you're not rejecting the person making the request. You're simply setting a boundary that protects your time, energy, and well-being. And while it might feel uncomfortable at first, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. One of the most freeing realizations you can have is that you don't owe anyone your time or energy. You are not responsible for meeting everyone's needs or making everyone happy. When you start to prioritize yourself and set boundaries, you'll find that the people who truly care about you will respect your limits. And for those who don't, it's a sign that the relationship may not be as healthy as you once thought. Redefining kindness as selective and purposeful is a key part of breaking free from people-pleasing. Kindness is not about always saying yes or putting others first at all costs. True kindness is about being thoughtful and intentional with your actions. It's about helping others when it's meaningful and aligned with your values, not out of obligation or fear. And most importantly, it's about being kind to yourself, recognizing that you deserve the same care and respect that you offer to others. As you begin to break the pattern of people-pleasing, you'll notice a shift in your relationships. You'll start to feel more empowered, more in control of your time and energy. You'll also begin to reconnect with your authentic self as you stop living for others and start living for yourself. This journey won't happen overnight, but with practice and perseverance, you can break free from the cycle of people-pleasing and create a life that is truly aligned with your values and desires. Emotional drain is one of the most subtle yet damaging forms of exhaustion. It can creep up on you without warning, especially if you're someone who constantly puts others first, always striving to meet the needs of those around you while neglecting your own. The signs of emotional exhaustion may not be as obvious as physical tiredness, but they can be just as debilitating, if not more so. Emotional drain slowly chips away at your energy reserves, leaving you feeling mentally, emotionally, and even physically depleted. Recognizing when you're emotionally drained is the first step to reclaiming your well-being and establishing healthier boundaries. Emotional drain often manifests as a persistent feeling of fatigue that isn't relieved by rest or sleep. You may wake up feeling just as tired as you did when you went to bed, even though you slept through the night. Unlike physical tiredness, which can usually be cured with a good night's rest, emotional exhaustion lingers and affects every aspect of your life. You may find that tasks that used to be easy now feel overwhelming, and your patience for dealing with others' problems has worn thin. One of the key emotional symptoms of exhaustion is irritability. When you are emotionally drained, small annoyances can feel like huge problems. You might snap at loved ones or colleagues, even though you don't usually react that way. You may feel on edge, easily frustrated by things that wouldn't normally bother you. This irritability is a sign that your emotional reserves are running low and that you need to take a step back from the demands being placed on you. Another common sign of emotional drain is a loss of joy or interest in activities that you once enjoyed. Things that used to bring you happiness or fulfillment, whether it's spending time with friends, pursuing hobbies, or even just relaxing, may no longer seem appealing. Instead, you might feel a sense of dread or indifference, as if life has lost its spark. This loss of joy is a clear indicator that your emotional energy has been stretched too thin for too long. The causes of emotional drain are often linked to the constant pressure of caring for others, suppressing personal needs, and the relentless pursuit of approval. If you're always the one people turn to for help or support, it's easy to get trapped in a cycle of giving without ever replenishing your own energy. Caring for others is important, but when it becomes a one-sided transaction where you are always giving and never receiving, it leads to burnout. Suppressing your own needs in favor of others is another major cause of emotional exhaustion. Many people are conditioned to believe that putting themselves first is selfish, so they push their own needs aside in order to accommodate others. But constantly ignoring your own well-being takes a significant toll on your mental and emotional health. Over time, this self-neglect leads to feelings of resentment, frustration, and even guilt. The endless pursuit of approval is another significant factor in emotional drain. When you're constantly seeking validation from others, whether it's through your work, your relationships, or your everyday interactions, you expend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to meet everyone else's expectations. This need for external validation can leave you feeling empty and unfulfilled, because no amount of approval from others can truly fill the void of self-worth. The more you chase approval, the more drained you become. The physical symptoms of emotional exhaustion can be just as serious as the emotional and mental ones. You might experience headaches, stomach aches, or muscle tension as your body responds to the stress of constantly being on edge. Difficulty sleeping is another common symptom, as your mind may race with thoughts of all the things you need to do, the people you need to please, or the problems you're trying to solve. This lack of rest only compounds the emotional drain, creating a vicious cycle of exhaustion that becomes harder to break. To combat emotional drain, it's essential to start by recognizing when it's happening. One effective way to do this is by monitoring your energy levels throughout the day. Pay attention to when you feel energized versus when you feel depleted. Notice how you feel after interacting with certain people or completing specific tasks. Do you feel recharged or drained? By tracking your energy levels, you can start to identify patterns and triggers that contribute to your emotional exhaustion. Once you've identified the sources of emotional drain, the next step is to establish self-checks and boundaries. This means setting aside time each day to tune into your emotional state and assess how you're feeling. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you constantly putting others' needs before your own? Taking a few moments each day to check in with yourself allows you to recognize when you're approaching emotional burnout and gives you the opportunity to take corrective action before it spirals out of control. Another important strategy is to prioritize activities that nourish your emotional well-being. This could include anything from practicing mindfulness or meditation to engaging in a creative hobby, spending time in nature, or simply taking a break from social obligations. It's essential to carve out time for yourself each day, even if it's just a few minutes, to recharge your emotional batteries. Remember, Self-care is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Lastly, it's crucial to give yourself permission to say no. If you're constantly taking on more than you can handle, whether at work, in relationships, or in other areas of your life, you will quickly become emotionally drained. Learning to say no without guilt is a powerful tool for protecting your emotional energy and preventing burnout. It's not about being unkind or selfish. It's about recognizing your limits and respecting them. While giving to others is often seen as a noble and virtuous act, constant overgiving comes with a steep price. Many people, especially those who pride themselves on being generous and caring, fail to recognize the invisible toll that overgiving takes on their emotional, mental, and physical health. When you consistently give without taking the time to replenish your own energy, you eventually reach a point of exhaustion where you have nothing left to give, not to others, and certainly not to yourself. The emotional toll of constant giving is one of the most profound. When you're always focused on others' needs, it becomes easy to lose touch with your own. You may find yourself constantly worrying about how to help others, how to solve their problems, and how to meet their expectations. This external focus leaves little room for self-reflection, self-care, or personal growth. Over time, you may begin to feel resentful or even bitter, as you realize that you've been giving so much to others that you've neglected your own well-being. Mental health also suffers when you're constantly overgiving. The mental load of managing not only your own responsibilities, but also the needs and expectations of others can be overwhelming. You may find yourself feeling mentally scattered, unable to focus on tasks that matter to you because your mind is always occupied with what you need to do for others. This can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and even depression, as you start to feel like you're losing control over your own life. Physically, constant giving can lead to a range of symptoms, including fatigue, headaches, and tension in the body. When you're always giving to others without taking time to rest and recharge, your body eventually starts to break down. You might experience insomnia, digestive issues, or even chronic pain as a result of the stress and pressure you're placing on yourself. In extreme cases, the physical toll of overgiving can lead to more serious health problems, such as burnout or illness. One of the most significant costs of constant giving is the time you sacrifice. Every time you say yes to someone else's request, you're saying no to something else. Often, that something else is your own personal goals, relaxation, or self-care. Over time, these small sacrifices add up, and before you know it, you're living a life that revolves around other people's needs and expectations, with little time left for your own ambitions or dreams. This loss of time not only affects your ability to pursue personal goals, but also leads to a deep sense of dissatisfaction. When you're always giving and never receiving, you start to lose touch with what you truly want out of life. You may begin to feel like you're just going through the motions, always busy, but never truly fulfilled. This sense of personal dissatisfaction can be devastating to your self-esteem, as you begin to question whether your efforts are truly making a difference or whether you're just spinning your wheels. Constant giving also takes a toll on your identity. When you spend all your time focusing on others, you lose sight of who you are and what you want. Your identity becomes wrapped up in being the helper or the giver, and you start to define your worth based on how much you do for others. This can lead to a crisis of identity, where you no longer know who you are outside of your role as the one who gives and supports. Over time, this can lead to feelings of emptiness and a lack of purpose, as you struggle to reconnect with your own desires and values. The impact of constant giving extends to your relationships as well. While you may think that giving more will strengthen your relationships, the opposite is often true. Overgiving can create an imbalance in relationships, where one person is always taking and the other is always giving. This imbalance leads to resentment on both sides, resentment from the giver, who feels unappreciated and taken advantage of, and resentment from the taker, who may feel suffocated or dependent on the giver. This dynamic can strain relationships and, in some cases, lead to their breakdown. Moreover, when you're constantly giving, you may attract people who are more than happy to take advantage of your generosity. These takers may not have bad intentions, but they can become dependent on your willingness to give, expecting you to always be there for them. This creates a cycle where you feel obligated to continue giving, even when it's detrimental to your well-being. Over time, this dynamic can foster feelings of resentment, frustration, and even anger, as you realize that your generosity is being taken for granted. In order to break free from the cycle of overgiving, it's essential to start by recognizing the invisible toll it's taking on your life. Once you acknowledge the emotional, mental, and physical costs of constant giving, you can begin to make changes that allow you to reclaim your time, energy, and sense of self. One of the most powerful steps you can take is to start setting boundaries, both with others and with yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop giving altogether. It simply means you give in a way that is healthy and sustainable, both for you and for the people you care about. By establishing clear limits on how much time and energy you're willing to devote to others, you protect yourself from burnout and ensure that your giving is coming from a place of abundance rather than depletion. Self-care has become a buzzword in recent years, often associated with indulgent activities like spa days or bubble baths. While these things can certainly be part of self-care, true self-care goes much deeper. It's not about pampering yourself occasionally. It's about maintaining your emotional, mental, and physical health on a daily basis. Self-care is the foundation that allows you to show up fully in your life and relationships. Without it, you are more likely to experience burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Self-care is essential for emotional health because it involves recognizing and meeting your own needs. This doesn't mean being selfish or neglecting the needs of others. On the contrary, self-care ensures that you are in a healthy, balanced place so that you can be genuinely present for the people who matter to you. Think of self-care as the maintenance your body and mind require to function optimally. Just as a car needs regular tune-ups to run smoothly, you need consistent care to keep your emotional, mental, and physical systems in check. One of the first steps to prioritizing self-care is recognizing what your needs are. This might sound simple, but many people, especially those who are used to putting others first, struggle to identify their own needs. You may have spent so long catering to others that you've lost touch with what truly nourishes you. Take time to reflect on what activities, environments, and boundaries help you feel energized and fulfilled. For some, it might be spending time in nature, while for others, it could be engaging in creative activities, exercising, or simply having alone time to decompress. Understanding your boundaries is a critical aspect of self-care. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define what you are and are not willing to tolerate in your relationships and daily life. They protect your emotional and physical well-being by giving you the space to prioritize your own needs without feeling overwhelmed or taken advantage of. Identifying your boundaries requires paying attention to when you feel drained, uncomfortable, or resentful. These feelings are often signals that a boundary has been crossed and that self-care is needed. Now that you've identified your needs and boundaries, it's time to integrate practical self-care routines into your daily life. Self-care isn't about grand gestures, it's about consistency. Here are some simple but powerful practices you can incorporate into your routine to support your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Daily check-ins. Take a few minutes each day to check in with yourself. How are you feeling emotionally, mentally, and physically? Are there areas where you feel depleted or overextended? This self-awareness will help you address issues before they lead to burnout. Mindfulness or meditation. Practicing mindfulness or meditation for even just 5 to 10 minutes a day can significantly reduce stress and help you stay grounded in the present moment. It's a powerful tool for managing emotional overwhelm and staying connected to your inner needs. Exercise. Physical activity is one of the most effective ways to care for your body and mind. Whether it's a daily walk, yoga, or a more intense workout, moving your body releases endorphins and helps reduce stress, improve mood, and boost energy levels. Healthy eating. What you eat has a profound impact on your energy and emotional well-being. Prioritize whole foods that nourish your body and pay attention to how certain foods make you feel. A balanced diet can contribute to sustained energy and mental clarity. Sleep. Quality. Sleep is foundational for all aspects of health. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of restful sleep each night and create a calming bedtime routine to help you unwind and prepare your mind and body for rest. Alone time. If you are constantly surrounded by people or bombarded with demands, make sure to carve out time for yourself. Solitude is essential for recharging, reflecting, and reconnecting with your own thoughts and emotions. Creative outlets. Engaging in creative activities like writing, painting, or playing music can be a powerful way to relieve stress and express yourself. Creativity nourishes the soul and allows you to tap into your sense of joy and fulfillment. Self-care is about more than just adding activities to your schedule. It's about cultivating a mindset that prioritizes your well-being. This means recognizing that you have the right to take care of yourself without feeling guilty or selfish. Too often, people, especially those who identify as givers, believe that prioritizing their own needs is somehow wrong. But the truth is, you can't be truly kind to others if you are constantly neglecting yourself. You need to fill your own cup before you can pour into anyone else's. Balancing kindness with self-respect is key. Kindness doesn't mean always saying yes or sacrificing your well-being for others. True kindness is selective and purposeful. It's about helping others when you genuinely have the emotional and physical resources to do so. It's also about being kind to yourself, recognizing that you deserve the same care, compassion, and respect that you offer to others. By setting limits on how much you give and ensuring that you take time for yourself, you create a healthier, more sustainable version of kindness, one that doesn't come at the expense of your own well-being. Setting healthy boundaries is one of the most important aspects of maintaining emotional and mental well-being. Boundaries are the personal limits you establish to protect your time, energy, and emotional space. They define where your responsibility ends and where someone else's begins. For people who are used to constantly giving or being there for others, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first, but they are essential for creating balanced, respectful relationships and avoiding emotional burnout. What do healthy boundaries look like? Boundaries can take many forms, from deciding how much time you're willing to spend with certain people to defining what behaviors you will or will not tolerate in your relationships. Boundaries help you protect your emotional space, ensuring that you don't become overwhelmed by others' demands or expectations. For example, a boundary could be as simple as deciding not to check work emails after 6 p.m., or it could involve telling a friend that you're not available to listen to their problems every time they call. Establishing boundaries requires a deep understanding of your own needs and limits. Many people struggle to set boundaries because they feel guilty or afraid of how others will react. If you've been conditioned to believe that setting boundaries is selfish or unkind, it can be difficult to enforce them without feeling like you're letting others down. But the truth is, boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting your own emotional health and ensuring that your relationships remain balanced and healthy. Overcoming the guilt and fear associated with setting boundaries is a crucial step. Many people fear that if they set boundaries, others will think they are uncaring or unkind. You might worry that saying no will lead to conflict or that people will no longer like or respect you. However, this is a misconception. In fact, setting boundaries is a sign of self-respect, and people who truly care about you will understand and respect your limits. It's important to remember that you are not responsible for other people's reactions to your boundaries. You are only responsible for communicating your needs clearly and respectfully. One of the best ways to start setting boundaries is by practicing self-awareness. Pay attention to how you feel in different situations and relationships. Are there moments when you feel drained, overwhelmed, or taken advantage of? These are likely signs that a boundary needs to be set. Once you've identified the areas where you need boundaries, it's time to communicate them clearly and assertively. When communicating your boundaries, be direct but respectful. You don't need to apologize or over-explain your reasons for setting a boundary. For example, if a friend frequently asks for favors that you're not comfortable doing, you can simply say, "I'm not able to help with that right now." If a coworker tends to interrupt your personal time with work requests, you can let them know, "I don't respond to work emails after 6 p.m., but I'll be happy to look at this tomorrow." The key is to be firm in your communication while also being kind and respectful. It's also important to remember that setting boundaries isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. You may need to reinforce your boundaries over time, especially if someone continues to push against them. For example, if a friend or family member keeps asking for favors even after you've set a boundary, you'll need to remind them of your limits. This can be difficult, especially if you're used to saying yes to everything, but standing firm is crucial for maintaining your emotional well-being. Maintaining boundaries can be challenging, especially if others are used to you being constantly available or willing to help. Some people may test your boundaries or react negatively when you first start setting them. This is normal, especially if they're accustomed to you giving more than you should. However, it's important to stay consistent and not back down from your boundaries out of guilt or fear. Over time, people will learn to respect your limits, and you'll find that setting boundaries actually strengthens your relationships. When enforcing boundaries, it's helpful to have a few strategies in place to stay firm. One effective approach is to practice self-affirmation. Remind yourself that setting boundaries is an act of self-care and that you are entitled to protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. It can also be helpful to role-play difficult conversations with a trusted friend or in your mind, so you feel prepared to communicate your boundaries assertively when the time comes. Finally, it's important to recognize that setting boundaries is not just about protecting yourself. It's also about improving the quality of your relationships. Healthy boundaries create a sense of mutual respect and understanding. They prevent resentment from building up, as both parties are clear about their expectations and limits. In the long run, setting boundaries leads to more fulfilling, balanced relationships where both people feel valued and respected. The power of saying no cannot be overstated. It's one of the most effective tools you have for reclaiming control over your time, emotional energy, and mental well-being. Yet, for many people, saying no feels like an impossible task. We're conditioned to believe that turning someone down is rude or unkind, and we often say yes to things we don't want to do out of guilt, fear of rejection, or the desire to please others. But in reality, constantly saying yes, especially when you want to say no, leads to emotional burnout, resentment, and a sense of losing control over your own life. Saying no is about reclaiming that control. Every time you agree to do something that doesn't align with your values, needs, or time, you give a piece of your energy away. Over time, these small concessions accumulate, leaving you depleted and frustrated. By learning to say no, you take back ownership of your time and emotional resources, allowing you to focus on the things that truly matter to you. The importance of saying no goes beyond just protecting your time. It's also about setting boundaries and maintaining your self-respect. When you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're essentially telling yourself that your own needs and desires are less important than someone else's. But when you say no, you're affirming that your time, energy, and well-being are valuable and deserve to be protected. One of the biggest challenges in learning to say no is balancing assertiveness with kindness. You don't want to come across as rude or indifferent, but you also don't want to over-explain or justify your decision. Many people feel the need to offer long explanations when they say no, as if their refusal isn't valid unless backed up by a good reason. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your time and energy. Saying no kindly but assertively involves being clear, direct, and respectful. You don't need to apologize for setting boundaries, and you certainly don't need to provide an elaborate excuse. A simple, "I'm sorry, I'm not able to take that on right now," is more than enough. You can acknowledge the request while still standing firm in your decision. The key is to be polite but unwavering, sending the message that your boundaries are non-negotiable. Here are a few practical scenarios for saying no in different areas of life. At work. If a colleague or boss asks you to take on extra work when you're already overwhelmed, you can say, "I'm currently at capacity with my current projects, but I'd be happy to revisit this at a later time if possible." This shows that you're open to helping, but not at the expense of your current workload. With family. Family can be particularly tricky, especially if you feel obligated to say yes out of love or duty. For example, if a family member asks you to help with a task or attend an event you're not able to, you can say, "I'm sorry, I won't be able to make it, but I hope it goes well." This acknowledges their request without making you feel pressured to attend. With friends. When a friend asks for your time or assistance in a way that feels too much, you can say, "I'm really sorry, but I'm not available for that right now." You can offer an alternative, like catching up at another time, but don't feel obligated to sacrifice your well-being just to be accommodating. Remember, saying no is not about being unkind or selfish. It's about maintaining your boundaries and prioritizing your well-being. It's okay to protect your energy, even if it means disappointing someone else. The people who truly respect and care for you will understand and support your decision. Saying no is also an act of self-respect. It shows that you value your time, energy, and mental health enough to protect them. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to something that does. Whether it's time for self-care, focus on your personal goals, or simply the space to breathe and recharge. Shifting your mindset from guilt to empowerment is key to embracing the power of no. Instead of feeling bad about setting limits, remind yourself that you're making a choice to respect yourself and your boundaries. Over time, this mindset shift will help you feel more confident and less guilty about saying no. The fear of rejection is a deeply ingrained primal fear that affects nearly everyone at some point in their lives. It taps into one of our most basic human needs, the need for social connection and belonging. From an evolutionary standpoint, being accepted by our group was essential for survival. In ancient times, being rejected by the tribe could mean being left to fend for yourself, which was a dangerous prospect. While our survival no longer depends on group acceptance in the same way, the fear of rejection is still hardwired into us. Rejection feels threatening because it triggers that primal fear of being disliked, excluded, or ostracized. On a psychological level, rejection can feel like a direct attack on our self-worth, as if someone is telling us that we're not good enough or that we don't belong. This fear is often what fuels people-pleasing behavior. We believe that by constantly being kind, agreeable, and accommodating, we can avoid the sting of rejection and gain approval from others. But the reality is, no matter how kind, generous, or self-sacrificing you are, not everyone will like you or approve of you, and that's okay. The problem arises when the fear of rejection becomes the driving force behind your behavior, leading you to sacrifice your own needs, values, and boundaries just to gain approval from others. This is where people-pleasing can become toxic, both for your self-esteem and your emotional well-being. The fear of rejection often compels people to seek validation through kindness. You might feel that by being kind to everyone, no matter the cost, you'll be liked and accepted. But in doing so, you're often putting others' approval above your own sense of self-worth. The constant pursuit of external validation can leave you feeling exhausted and unfulfilled, because no amount of external approval can truly fill the void of self-worth. You may find yourself doing things you don't want to do, agreeing with opinions you don't agree with, or suppressing your true feelings just to avoid rejection. Overcoming the fear of rejection requires a fundamental mindset shift. It starts with recognizing that rejection is not a reflection of your worth. Just because someone doesn't like you, agree with you, or accept you doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. People's opinions are often influenced by their own insecurities, biases, and expectations, and their rejection of you says more about them than it does about you. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is that not everyone's opinion matters. You don't need validation from everyone, and you certainly don't need to seek approval from people who don't value or respect you. Embracing this fact frees you from the endless cycle of people-pleasing and allows you to live more authentically without constantly worrying about how others perceive you. To overcome the fear of rejection, it's essential to build your self-worth from within, rather than relying on external validation. This means developing internal mechanisms for self-approval and learning to validate yourself based on your own values, beliefs, and sense of purpose. When your self-worth is grounded in who you are, rather than in how others see you, rejection becomes less threatening because it no longer defines your sense of value. One powerful way to develop internal validation is through self-compassion. Practice treating yourself with kindness and understanding, especially when you face rejection. Instead of beating yourself up or questioning your worth, remind yourself that rejection is a normal part of life and that it doesn't diminish your value. Self-compassion allows you to bounce back from rejection with resilience and confidence, knowing that your worth is not determined by others. Another way to build self-worth is by embracing your uniqueness. Recognize that you have qualities, experiences, and perspectives that make you who you are, and that not everyone will resonate with or appreciate those qualities, and that's okay. Celebrate what makes you different, rather than trying to fit into everyone else's expectations. The more you embrace your authentic self, the less you'll feel the need to seek approval from others. It's also helpful to remember that rejection can sometimes be a blessing in disguise. When someone rejects you, they're often doing you a favor by showing you who they are and what they value. Instead of seeing rejection as a personal failure, try to view it as a redirection, an opportunity to focus on relationships and opportunities that align with your values and bring out the best in you. Guilt can be an overwhelming and powerful emotion, especially when it comes to prioritizing your own needs. Many people struggle with guilt when they start to put themselves first, largely because they've been conditioned to believe that self-care is selfish. From a young age, we are often taught that being kind and accommodating to others is virtuous, while focusing on ourselves is self-centered. This belief can be deeply ingrained, leading to a constant internal conflict when we try to set boundaries or take time for ourselves. But the truth is, self-care is not selfish, it's essential. Guilt shows up when you prioritize yourself because of the way society, family, and sometimes even personal experiences have shaped your understanding of kindness and responsibility. We are often conditioned to believe that we should always be available for others, that saying no is unkind, and that our worth is measured by how much we give. As a result, the idea of putting yourself first can feel uncomfortable and provoke feelings of guilt, even when it's clearly necessary for your well-being. To break free from guilt, you need to start by reframing it as unnecessary. Guilt is often a signal that we're violating some internal rule or belief, but not all of these rules are helpful or healthy. If you've been operating under the belief that you must always be kind and accommodating, it's time to question that belief. Is it really true that self-care is selfish? Is it wrong to prioritize your mental, emotional, and physical health? The answer, of course, is no. In fact, self-care is what allows you to show up fully in your life and relationships. When you are well-rested, emotionally balanced, and mentally clear, you can give more meaningfully and effectively to the people and causes that matter to you. Guilt can become particularly strong when you start setting boundaries or saying no to people who are used to you being constantly available. It's important to understand that this guilt is not a reflection of wrongdoing. It's simply a conditioned response. Over time, as you practice prioritizing yourself and begin to experience the benefits of self-care, this guilt will begin to fade. But in the meantime, it's essential to remind yourself that your well-being is not selfish. It's necessary for your overall health and happiness. Letting go of false obligations is a key part of breaking free from guilt. Many people feel obligated to always say yes, always be kind, and always put others first, even when it comes at a great personal cost. These false obligations can come from external sources, such as societal expectations, cultural norms, or family dynamics, but they are also often self-imposed. You might believe that if you don't help others or meet their needs, you're failing as a friend, family member, or colleague. But this belief is a trap. It leads to overextending yourself, burning out, and feeling resentful, none of which are conducive to healthy, fulfilling relationships. To free yourself from these false obligations, it's helpful to start by identifying where they come from. Are there specific people or situations that trigger your feelings of guilt when you prioritize yourself? Are there certain internal rules you've been living by that are no longer serving you? Once you've identified the source of your guilt, you can begin to challenge and reframe these beliefs. Remind yourself that it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries, and it's okay to take care of yourself without feeling like you owe anyone an explanation or apology. Living without guilt is possible, but it requires conscious effort and self-awareness. One of the most effective strategies for making peace with self-care choices is to practice self-compassion. Instead of judging yourself harshly for prioritizing your own needs, treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a close friend. Remind yourself that you deserve the same care and consideration you give to others. Another strategy is to develop a self-care routine that feels nourishing and supportive. When self-care becomes a regular part of your life, it no longer feels like a guilty indulgence. It becomes a natural and necessary part of your day-to-day existence. This routine can include anything from regular exercise to mindfulness practices to spending time on hobbies that bring you joy. The more you prioritize your well-being, the easier it will be to make peace with the choices you make to protect your energy and emotional health. In conclusion, breaking free from guilt involves recognizing that the belief that self-care is selfish is both outdated and unhelpful. By reframing guilt as unnecessary, letting go of false obligations, and embracing self-care as essential, you can learn to prioritize yourself without feeling guilty. Remember, you are worthy of the same care and consideration you give to others, and taking care of yourself is not only okay, it's crucial. Not all relationships are worth saving. As much as we'd like to believe that every connection we form can be positive and nurturing, the reality is that some relationships are toxic and damaging. Whether it's a personal friendship, a family member, or a professional colleague, unhealthy relationships can drain your emotional energy, erode your self-confidence, and leave you feeling exhausted and unfulfilled. It's important to recognize these toxic dynamics and take steps to protect your emotional health, even if it means disengaging from certain people. Recognizing toxic dynamics in a relationship can be challenging, especially if the negative behavior is subtle or has been going on for a long time. Unhealthy relationships often involve emotional manipulation, where one person exerts control or influence over another through guilt, shame, or other psychological tactics. This might involve making you feel responsible for their happiness, pressuring you to prioritize their needs over your own, or using passive-aggressive behavior to get their way. Emotional manipulation can be difficult to spot because it's often disguised as concern, care, or even love. However, the key sign of manipulation is how it makes you feel: drained, guilty, and never quite good enough. Constant criticism. Whether it's overt or subtle, constant criticism can wear down your self-esteem. In a healthy relationship, constructive feedback is given with kindness and respect. In a toxic relationship, criticism is often used as a tool to control or diminish you. Emotional blackmail. Emotional manipulators often use guilt or fear to get what they want. They might say things like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this," or "You're the only one who can help me," making you feel obligated to meet their demands. Lack of reciprocity. In a healthy relationship, there is a balance of give and take. In an unhealthy relationship, one person consistently takes without giving anything in return, leaving you feeling unappreciated and depleted. Boundary violations. Toxic people often disregard your boundaries, whether it's by demanding too much of your time, crossing personal or emotional lines, or ignoring your need for space. When you're in an unhealthy relationship, it's easy to feel trapped, especially if the other person has been a part of your life for a long time. However, it's important to recognize that not all relationships are worth saving. Some connections, no matter how much history they have, are simply not healthy for you. This doesn't mean you have to cut people off abruptly or with hostility, but it does mean you need to prioritize your own emotional well-being over maintaining a toxic dynamic. Learning to prioritize yourself over toxic people is a difficult but necessary step in protecting your emotional health. It's common to feel conflicted, especially if the person in question is someone you care about or feel responsible for. But remember, you cannot heal or change someone else. It's not your job to fix people, and sacrificing your own well-being in the process only leads to more harm. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for both yourself and the other person is to create distance. Disengaging from harmful connections can be done without drama or conflict. It's about setting boundaries and gradually removing yourself from the toxic dynamic. If you feel comfortable, you can have an honest conversation with the person about how their behavior is affecting you. If not, you can simply start by creating more space between you, saying no to their requests, and limiting your interactions. Over time, you'll find that as you create these boundaries, the unhealthy relationship will naturally fade from your life. It's important to note that disengaging doesn't have to mean cutting someone off entirely. In some cases, especially with family or work relationships, that may not be possible or practical. In these situations, setting clear boundaries is key. Limit your interactions to what feels manageable, and don't allow the other person to cross your emotional or personal boundaries. Protecting your emotional health is not selfish. It's necessary for your overall well-being. You deserve relationships that are supportive, reciprocal, and nurturing. If a relationship is consistently draining, manipulative, or toxic, it's okay to let it go. By prioritizing yourself and disengaging from harmful connections, you create space for healthier, more fulfilling relationships to enter your life. Energy vampires are individuals who, whether intentionally or not, drain your emotional and mental energy. These people often seem to leave you feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, or emotionally depleted after interacting with them. They may not realize the toll they are taking on you, but their behaviors and attitudes can sap your energy, making it difficult for you to focus on your own needs and well-being. Learning to identify energy vampires and manage your interactions with them is crucial for protecting your emotional health. Energy vampires can come in many forms, and they often share certain common traits. One of the most noticeable traits is a victim mentality. These individuals often see themselves as perpetual victims of circumstance, constantly seeking sympathy and validation from others. They may frequently complain about their lives, but they rarely take any meaningful action to change their situation. Instead, they rely on others to provide emotional support and reassurance, which can become draining over time. The problem is that no matter how much support you offer, it never seems to be enough. Energy vampires often remain stuck in their negative patterns, leaving you feeling powerless and emotionally drained. Another common trait of energy vampires is their tendency to monopolize attention. These individuals often dominate conversations, steering them toward their own problems, needs, or desires. They may interrupt or redirect the focus back to themselves, leaving little room for others to share or contribute. Over time, this can create an imbalanced dynamic where the energy vampire is always the center of attention, and you feel like your own needs are being neglected. Negative attitudes are also characteristic of energy vampires. They tend to focus on the negative aspects of situations, often expressing pessimism, cynicism, or constant dissatisfaction. Being around someone with this kind of outlook can be draining because their negativity can start to affect your own mood and energy levels. You might find yourself feeling more anxious, stressed, or down after spending time with them, even if you started the conversation in a positive or neutral state of mind. Once you've identified the energy vampires in your life, the next step is learning how to manage your interactions with them. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting them out of your life completely, though in some cases that may be the best option. Instead, it's about setting boundaries that protect your emotional space and ensure that your interactions with them are manageable. The first and most important step in managing energy vampires is to set clear boundaries. This might involve limiting the amount of time you spend with them or the topics of conversation you're willing to engage in. For example, if you have a friend who constantly complains about their life but never takes action to improve it, you might set a boundary by gently redirecting the conversation when it starts to become negative or repetitive. You can say something like, "I understand you're going through a tough time, but let's focus on solutions or shift to a lighter topic for now." This allows you to maintain control of the conversation and protect your emotional energy without cutting the person off completely. Another important boundary is limiting your availability. If you have an energy vampire who frequently seeks your attention or emotional support, it's okay to limit how often you're available to help. You might decide to only respond to their calls or texts at certain times, or you might let them know that you're not always available to listen to their problems. It's important to remember that you're not obligated to be there for everyone all the time, especially if it comes at the expense of your own well-being. Finally, it's crucial to let go of guilt when distancing yourself from energy vampires. Many people struggle with guilt when they start to set boundaries, especially if they've been conditioned to always be kind and accommodating. But it's important to understand that protecting your emotional health is not selfish. It's necessary. You cannot continue to give if you're constantly being drained, and distancing yourself from energy vampires is essential for maintaining your well-being. Letting go of guilt means recognizing that it's okay to prioritize your own needs and that you're not responsible for fixing or saving others. Emotional energy is a finite resource, just like physical energy. If you overextend yourself emotionally, you will eventually find yourself feeling depleted, anxious, or burned out. Many people overlook the importance of preserving their emotional energy, but the truth is, it's just as essential to your well-being as taking care of your physical health. When you view your emotional energy as a valuable resource, you begin to understand the importance of protecting it and using it wisely. One of the first steps in preserving your emotional energy is recognizing that it's finite. You don't have an endless supply of emotional resilience or capacity, and that's okay. Just as you need to rest and recharge physically, you also need to do the same emotionally. When you start to treat your emotional energy as a limited resource, you'll begin to prioritize the activities and relationships that replenish you, and you'll become more selective about where and how you invest your energy. Identifying activities that drain and recharge you is a crucial part of this process. Some activities may seem small, but they can have a significant impact on your emotional reserves. For example, spending time with a friend who constantly complains or engaging in social media debates can quickly drain your energy. On the other hand, activities like spending time in nature, practicing mindfulness, or engaging in creative hobbies can recharge your emotional reserves. It's helpful to make a list of activities that leave you feeling drained versus those that leave you feeling replenished. This can include everything from social interactions to work tasks to your leisure activities. Once you have a clear picture of what drains and recharges you, you can start to make more intentional choices about how you spend your time and energy. Protecting your energy is about setting limits on how much you give and ensuring that you have time and space to recharge. This might involve saying no to certain social events, limiting your exposure to negative news or social media, or setting boundaries with people who tend to drain your energy. It's important to recognize that you don't have to be available for everyone all the time. Protecting your energy means knowing when to step back and take time for yourself, even if it means disappointing others in the short term. One of the most practical steps you can take to avoid burnout is to schedule regular downtime. Just as you would schedule time for work or other responsibilities, make sure you're scheduling time for rest and relaxation. This can be as simple as taking a 10-minute break to meditate during a busy day, or as involved as planning a weekend getaway to disconnect and recharge. The key is to make self-care a priority, rather than something you only do when you're already feeling depleted. Creating balance in your life is essential for preserving emotional energy. It's easy to fall into the trap of constantly giving and doing, especially if you're someone who is naturally empathetic or driven to help others. But balance means recognizing that you need time for yourself as well. It's not sustainable to give all your energy to others without taking time to replenish your own reserves. By focusing on what truly fulfills you and learning when to withdraw energy from activities or relationships that are draining, you can create a healthier, more balanced approach to life. A helpful way to think about this is to view your emotional energy as a battery. Every interaction, task, or responsibility either charges or drains your battery. If you're constantly giving without recharging, your battery will eventually run out. But if you take the time to engage in activities that recharge you, you can maintain a healthy emotional balance and avoid burnout. Self-compassion is a vital but often overlooked aspect of emotional well-being. Many of us find it easier to show compassion toward others than we do toward ourselves. However, self-compassion, the ability to be kind and understanding toward yourself, especially in moments of struggle, is the foundation for true emotional health. It allows you to recover from difficulties with grace and resilience, and it offers a buffer against the stress, guilt, and self-criticism that often accompany challenges. At its core, self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness and care that you would offer to a close friend. When a friend is going through a difficult time, you wouldn't berate them or tell them that they aren't good enough. Instead, you would likely offer words of comfort, understanding, and encouragement. Practicing self-compassion involves applying that same level of kindness and patience to yourself, especially when you're struggling, have made a mistake, or are feeling overwhelmed. One of the key elements of self-compassion is forgiving yourself for overextending. In our busy lives, it's easy to fall into the trap of overcommitting, saying yes to too many things, or neglecting our own needs in an effort to meet the needs of others. When we realize that we've overextended ourselves, it's common to feel guilt or self-criticism. You might think, "I should have known better," or "I'm always taking on too much." But self-compassion invites you to let go of this self-criticism and guilt. Instead of blaming yourself for overextending, recognize that it's a common experience and that you're doing the best you can in the moment. Mistakes and missteps are a natural part of life, and they offer an opportunity to learn and grow, rather than a reason to be hard on yourself. Forgiving yourself for overextending is an important step toward healing and finding balance. One of the most effective ways to practice self-compassion is to treat yourself like a friend. Imagine how you would speak to a close friend who was feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or discouraged. Would you criticize them, or would you offer them words of kindness and reassurance? Most likely, you'd choose the latter. When you practice self-compassion, you learn to talk to yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer someone else. This helps to counteract negative self-talk and create a more supportive, nurturing inner dialogue. For example, if you're feeling guilty for taking time for yourself or setting a boundary, instead of thinking, "I'm being selfish," you might say to yourself, "I'm allowed to take care of my own needs, and that doesn't make me a bad person." This shift in self-talk can have a profound impact on your emotional well-being, helping you to feel more at peace with your choices and more confident in your ability to care for yourself. Practical steps for daily self-compassion include simple but powerful practices that can help you cultivate a more compassionate relationship with yourself. One such practice is mindfulness, which involves being present with your thoughts and feelings without judgment. When you're mindful, you allow yourself to experience your emotions fully without trying to suppress them or push them away. Mindfulness helps you become aware of your inner experience, and this awareness is the first step towards self-compassion. For example, if you're feeling stressed or anxious, instead of ignoring those feelings or trying to push through them, you can acknowledge them mindfully by saying to yourself, "I'm feeling stressed right now, and that's okay." This simple act of acknowledgement can help you to feel more grounded and more compassionate toward yourself in the moment. Another tool for practicing self-compassion is self-acceptance. This means embracing all parts of yourself, the strengths and the weaknesses, the successes and the mistakes, without judgment. Self-acceptance is about recognizing that you are a whole person and that every aspect of your experience contributes to your growth and development. By accepting yourself as you are, you create space for healing and growth, and you free yourself from the pressure of perfectionism. For many of us, the concept of kindness has been shaped by the idea that it involves self-sacrifice or putting others' needs above our own. While kindness to others is certainly a virtue, it's important to recognize that kindness doesn't have to mean neglecting yourself in the process. In fact, true kindness is about balance, caring for others while also caring for yourself. Redefining kindness to include self-care is one of the most powerful shifts you can make for your emotional and mental well-being. One of the first steps in redefining kindness is shifting the definition of kindness itself. Many people equate kindness with self-sacrifice, believing that in order to be a good or kind person, they must constantly put others' needs ahead of their own. But this kind of thinking often leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Kindness doesn't have to mean giving up your own well-being to help others. Instead, it can mean being thoughtful, compassionate, and supportive, without sacrificing your own needs or boundaries. True kindness is about being selective and intentional in your actions, making sure that your kindness comes from a place of self-respect and emotional balance. When you redefine kindness to include yourself, you allow yourself to care for others in a way that is sustainable and healthy, rather than depleting. Balancing care for others with care for yourself is a crucial aspect of this new definition of kindness. It's important to recognize that you don't have to choose between caring for others and caring for yourself. You can do both. The key is learning when to prioritize your own needs and when to offer your time and energy to others. This requires self-awareness and honesty about your limits. For example, if you're feeling emotionally or physically drained, it's okay to say no to someone's request for help and take time for yourself instead. Remember, caring for yourself doesn't make you any less kind. It makes you more effective in your ability to care for others. When you're well-rested, emotionally balanced, and mentally clear, you have more to give to the people you care about. By prioritizing self-care, you're ensuring that you can show up fully in your relationships without feeling drained or resentful. Creating boundaries within kindness is another important part of this process. Boundaries are not barriers, they are guidelines that help you protect your energy and emotional health. Selective kindness, which is rooted in self-respect, involves being clear about when and how you give to others. For example, you might choose to help a friend move houses, but decline to take on an extra work project if you're already feeling overwhelmed. This doesn't make you unkind. It simply means that you're being mindful of your own well-being and managing your energy wisely. When you create boundaries within kindness, you allow yourself to give from a place of strength rather than from a place of depletion. You can offer your kindness without sacrificing your own needs or feeling resentful. This creates a healthier, more balanced dynamic in your relationships, where you can give and receive in a way that feels sustainable and fulfilling. In many ways, self-kindness is the most powerful form of kindness. When you are kind to yourself, you model for others how to treat you, and you set the tone for your relationships. Self-kindness also helps you cultivate resilience and emotional strength, so that you can navigate challenges with grace and confidence. By caring for yourself, you create a foundation of well-being that allows you to care for others more effectively. When you prioritize self-kindness, you're not only improving your own emotional health, you're also setting a positive example for others. You're showing that it's possible to be kind, compassionate, and supportive while still maintaining healthy boundaries and taking care of yourself. This can inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of balanced, healthy kindness in your relationships and community. The martyr complex is a psychological pattern where a person consistently sacrifices their own needs and desires for the sake of others, often to their own detriment. This can come from a deep-seated belief that in order to be valuable or worthy, one must always put others first, regardless of personal cost. While selflessness and kindness are virtues, when taken to an extreme, they become toxic. The martyr complex is often rooted in the desire for validation or recognition, where self-sacrifice becomes the primary means of seeking approval or love. People who struggle with the martyr complex often feel that their worth is tied to how much they give or suffer for others. They may feel guilty if they aren't constantly accommodating others' needs or putting themselves last. While this might seem like an admirable trait on the surface, it's important to recognize that martyrdom isn't true kindness. Constant self-sacrifice, especially when it leads to neglecting your own well-being, ultimately results in burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. True kindness comes from a place of balance and respect for yourself and for others. When you consistently sacrifice your own needs, you may begin to feel unappreciated or taken advantage of. This can lead to feelings of frustration or resentment toward the very people you're trying to help. Over time, this dynamic creates a toxic cycle where the martyr feels increasingly burdened and undervalued, while the recipients of their help may come to expect more and more, often without offering gratitude or support in return. Martyrdom isn't sustainable, and it's not the healthiest way to care for others. True kindness allows for reciprocity and respect. It's about helping others from a place of strength, where you can give without depleting yourself. When you let go of the martyr complex, you can begin to serve others more authentically, with healthy boundaries in place. Breaking free from seeking validation through sacrifice is a key step in overcoming the martyr complex. For many, the need to be needed becomes an unhealthy way of feeling valued or important. However, constantly sacrificing yourself for others is not the only way to feel worthwhile. Learning to prioritize your own needs without guilt is essential for developing a healthier sense of self-worth. One way to begin this shift is by reframing your idea of self-care. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for your overall well-being and ability to support others. By tending to your own needs, you'll be better equipped to help others in a way that feels fulfilling rather than draining. When you stop seeking external validation through sacrifice, you can start building a more authentic sense of self-worth, based on who you are rather than what you give up for others. True kindness comes from balance, not self-neglect. It's about serving others from a place of strength and wholeness rather than depletion. When you're able to care for yourself, you have more to offer to those around you. This doesn't mean you stop being kind or helpful. It means that you offer help in a way that's healthy and sustainable. Instead of sacrificing yourself, you're able to give from a place of fullness, which benefits both you and the people you care about. Letting go of the martyr complex isn't easy, especially if you've spent years defining your worth through self-sacrifice. But it's a necessary step toward reclaiming your emotional health and learning to practice true kindness, both to yourself and others. Saying no can be one of the most empowering acts of self-care, yet many people struggle with it. They feel compelled to justify their decisions, offer explanations, or soften their no to avoid conflict or disappointment. However, one of the most liberating realizations is that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your decisions. Reclaiming your autonomy begins with understanding that your no is enough on its own. When you constantly feel the need to explain or justify your choices, you're giving away your power. You're essentially asking for permission to prioritize your own needs, which undermines your confidence and self-respect. Saying no without explanation reinforces the idea that your time, energy, and boundaries are valid without needing external approval. There's a common fear that saying no will make you seem rude, unkind, or uncaring. But in reality, Saying no is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. It allows you to take control of your time and emotional energy, ensuring that you're not constantly overextending yourself or agreeing to things that don't align with your priorities. When you say no without feeling the need to explain, you're asserting your right to make choices based on your own well-being, without fear of judgment. The strength in setting boundaries lies in the confidence it builds. The more you practice saying no without offering explanations, the more empowered you'll feel. It reinforces the idea that your time and energy are valuable and that you have the right to decide how you use them. Over time, this confidence will extend to other areas of your life, helping you set clearer, healthier boundaries in your relationships and personal commitments. Boundaries, however, don't just protect your time, they protect your emotional health. When you say yes to everything out of a sense of obligation, you run the risk of emotional burnout. By saying no when necessary, you create space for rest, self-care, and activities that truly fulfill you. Saying no leads to freedom, allowing you to live without the constant pressure to explain or defend your choices. There's a profound sense of liberation that comes with knowing you don't have to justify your decisions to others. When you say no without explanation, you're not being rude. You're simply choosing to prioritize your well-being. This shift allows you to focus on what truly matters without the burden of trying to please everyone. Empowering self-care through clear limits is essential for maintaining your emotional and mental well-being. Setting limits helps you avoid overcommitting, and it gives you the space you need to recharge. It's important to remember that your well-being should always come first, and that setting boundaries is a necessary part of maintaining balance in your life. Saying no without explanation also frees you from the fear of judgment. You don't need to offer a reason for every decision you make. Your choices are valid simply because they reflect what's best for you in that moment. Learning to embrace this mindset allows you to move through life with greater confidence and ease, knowing that you're not obligated to explain yourself to anyone.